When I first visited the old house at home back in 2001, I was intrigued to learn about its rather sedate ghosts and mild paranormal activity. However, in 2016, everything had changed when renovation works appeared to have released some rather vindictive spirits who definitely wanted to make their presence felt. When I spoke to Jane Tonks, the manager of the old house at home, in 2001, she told me that she had only recently taken over the pub, and so would have to find out if there were any ghost stories connected with the old house at home. Having spoken to some bar staff who had been there for 4 years or more, Jane found that not only were there stories connected with the pub, but the bar staff had also seen something paranormal during their time there. I was told that the ghost of a very smart old man in a top hat and a little old lady had been seen in the pub. Both were said to date back to the Victorian period, judging by what they had been seen wearing. Jane told me that it was highly unlikely that these ghosts had anything to do with the pub, as the old house at home is a relatively new building. The only conclusion she could reach was that they may have something to do with the old houses that once occupied where the old house at home stands today. The original old house at home once stood on the Norton Road as seen in the photograph. From 1851 to 1881, the landlord of the old house at home was Charles Upton. In the 1940s, the old house at home met its demise. When researching the history of the old house at home, I was contacted by Mr. Morgan, who explained that he and his family once lived behind where the old house at home is today. Mr. Morgan told me that there used to be a handful of old cottages which occupied this site, together with a large well. In the 1960s, the families who lived there were offered new council houses, and the old pub and cottages were demolished. Unable to take everything with them, many items and unwanted goods were discarded and thrown down the well. Items included simple household goods to more elaborate items, such as gramophones. In one of the old cottages, there were 2 washstands with marble tops, complete with jugs and wash basins. These, together with old-fashioned china ornaments fashionable in the 1800s, were discarded in the well. Based on this and the age of the old cottages, it could be suggested that occupants of the cottages from many years before have come back to find out what has happened to their homes and their precious belongings, only to find that the old house at home stands there today. If you have any memories of these old cottages or the people who used to live there, please get in touch. Back in 2016, psychic medium Lynn Brooks and I were told about late-night CCTV footage which had picked up menus being thrown off tables by unseen hands, following which Lynn and I visited to investigate. When we visited, the then landlord was keen to tell us about what had been going on at the old house at home. We were already aware of other paranormal activity following the previous investigations. However, this paranormal activity was very different. The landlord told us that all had been quiet until an old fireplace had been unearthed during renovation works. the fireplace was restored to its former glory and given pride of place in the public house. Then all hell let loose. To begin with, the cleaner became aware of the presence of a man who was wearing a leather apron, the type old-fashioned landlords used to wear. The cleaner also began to hear voices in the empty pub, talking about dray, which is an old term used for ale, certainly a term not used today. Scoffing at what he had been told, a ghost hunter went to investigate the boiler room, which was said to be the most haunted part of the pub. He stood in the room for a while and saw and heard nothing, and before leaving he said, "Well, if you're not going to bother doing anything, I'll go." As he left the boiler room, he heard a loud thud from inside and decided to make his way sharply back to the main bar area. The landlord then went on to say that when checking through CCTV footage, his wife was shocked by what she saw as she watched invisible hands throw menus off the tables. Her shock then turned to horror as she saw a human-shaped grey apparition emerge from the table between the bandit and the bar, then walk over to the two tables seen here. The fireplace then returned to beneath the table by the bar. The footage was shown to us by the landlord, and menus could clearly be seen being flicked off tables by unseen hands, and something apparitional could definitely be seen emerging from under the table and crossing the area in front of the tables where we were sitting. After our meeting with the landlord, whilst using automatic writing, Lynn was prompted to write William's house. A message from the other side. Join me next year for more ghosts around Pelsall and something a little different.